Nya Evans made an impossible choice: marry a ruthless billionaire to save her dying mother. It was supposed to be a cold transaction. But as Julian Cross plays the perfect husband in public, Nya wonders, what if his act isn't just for show? What if she's falling for the man who bought her? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Nya Evans sat in the waiting room of New York's most expensive hospital, her eyes fixed on the worn sneakers she'd had for 3 years. The leather was cracking at the seams, just like her life was falling apart at this very moment. "I'm sorry, Miss Evans," the doctor had told her an hour ago. "Without this treatment, your mother has maybe 6 months. With it, we could extend that to years, possibly even reach remission." "And the cost?" Nya had asked, already knowing. The answer would be impossible: $300,000. Those words echoed in her head as she clutched her phone, scrolling through her contacts for anyone who might be able to loan her even a fraction of that amount. Her waitressing job barely covered their rent and food. Her friends were all struggling, too. There was no one. Nya looked up at the sound of footsteps and saw her mother's nurse approaching. "She's asking for you," the nurse said gently. Nya nodded and followed her to the room where Elaine Evans lay in bed, looking smaller than Nya had ever seen her. At 53, cancer had aged her beyond her years, her once vibrant brown skin now ashen, her bright eyes dulled by pain. "Baby girl," Elaine said, reaching out a thin hand, "don't you look so worried. I've lived a good life." "Stop talking like that, Mom," Nya said, taking her mother's hand. "You're going to get better." "Nya," her mother sighed, "we both know we can't afford this treatment, and I won't have you destroying your life trying to save mine. You're all—" "I have," Nya whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm not giving up." Later that night in their small apartment in the Bronx, Nya couldn't sleep. Her mother was finally home after 3 days in the hospital, resting in the bedroom they shared. Nya sat at their tiny kitchen table, staring at a newspaper that seemed to mock her with its headlines about the city's wealthy elite. Her eyes fell on a photo of Julian Cross, the 35-year-old CEO of Cross Enterprises. His cold blue eyes stared back at her from the page, accompanying an article about his latest business acquisition. "Worth billions," the article said. "Cold as ice in business dealings," it added. "Never married, no family, lives for work." Something shifted in Nya's mind as she stared at his face. An idea so crazy, so desperate, that it could only come from a woman with nothing left to lose. The next morning, Nya put on the only business-appropriate outfit she owned, a simple black dress. She'd bought for job interviews. She pulled her long, curly black hair into a neat bun and applied minimal makeup to her brown skin. "Where are you going all dressed up?" her mother asked from the couch where she'd been resting. "Job interview," Nya lied. "Something promising. You take your medicine?" "Yes, nurse," Elaine smiled weakly. "Go get 'em, baby." Nya kissed her mother's forehead before leaving, hoping against hope that her desperate plan might actually work. The Cross Enterprises building towered over Manhattan, a gleaming monument to wealth and power. Nya stood outside for several minutes, gathering her courage before walking through the revolving doors into the massive lobby. "I need to see Julian Cross," she told the receptionist, trying to sound confident. The woman looked Nya up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but Mr. Cross doesn't see anyone without an appointment." The receptionist turned back to her computer, dismissing Nya completely. Nya didn't move. "Tell him it's about a business proposition, one that will benefit him." The receptionist sighed dramatically. "Your name?" "Nya Evans. Wait there." She pointed to a seating area in the lobby. Nya sat for nearly 2 hours, watching people in expensive suits come and go. Just as she was about to give up, a stern-looking woman in a tailored navy suit approached her. "Miss Evans, I'm Mr. Cross's executive assistant. He's agreed to give you 5 minutes. Follow me." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent and tense. Nya's heart pounded, so hard she was sure the assistant could hear it. When the doors opened, she followed the woman down a hallway lined with modern art that probably cost more than her mother's treatment. "In here," the assistant said, opening a door to a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Julian Cross stood with his back to her, gazing out at the view. He was tall, his broad shoulders emphasized by his perfectly tailored grey suit. When he turned, Nya's breath caught. The newspaper photo hadn't done him justice. His face was impossibly handsome, all sharp angles and perfect symmetry, but his icy blue eyes were just as cold as she'd imagined. "Miss Evans," he said, his voice deep and disinterested. "You have 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Naya swallowed hard. "Mr. Cross, I have a business proposition for you." "I'm listening." He didn't invite her to sit, didn't move from his position by the window. "I propose a marriage contract," Nia said, the words tumbling out before she could lose her nerve. 1 year, me as your wife. In exchange, you pay for my mother's cancer treatment. Julian's expression didn't change, but he raised an eyebrow slightly. "And why would I agree to this unusual arrangement?" "Because you need something too," Nia said, remembering what she'd read about him that morning. "The Westbrook deal. They're a family-oriented company, and they're hesitant to work with you because of your reputation as a cold loner. A wife would soften your image, make you more relatable." A flicker of surprise crossed Julian's face. "You've done your homework." "I'm desperate, Mr. Cross. My mother has 6 months without this treatment. I'm offering you a year of my life. A business arrangement, nothing more." Julian walked to his desk and sat down, gesturing for her to take the seat across from him. $300,000 for cancer treatment in exchange for marriage. Yes. What makes you think I can't find someone more suitable? Someone from my social circle. Nia met his gaze directly. "Because they'd want more. They'd want your money, your lifestyle, a real marriage. I just want to save my mother's life. When the year is up, I walk away. Clean break." Julian studied her for a long moment. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Evans." "I'm desperate," she repeated, "and I'm running out of time." "What do you do for a living?" "I'm a waitress. I also do some freelance photography when I can get gigs." Julian's lips curled slightly. "A waitress, how appropriate." Nia felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she held her ground. "Do we have a deal or not, Mr. Cross?" To her surprise, Julian opened a drawer and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the desk to her. "My lawyer, be at his office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. If what you say about the Westbrook deal is accurate, perhaps we can come to an arrangement." Nia took the card with trembling fingers. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet, Miss Evans. If we do this, there will be rules, strict ones." "I understand." "I doubt that," Julian said, standing to indicate their meeting was over. "But you will." Next morning, Nia sat across from Julian's lawyer, a stern man named Mr. Winters, as he outlined the terms of the contract. "Mr. Cross will pay for your mother's treatment in full," Mr. Winters explained. "In return, you will play the role of his wife for exactly 1 year. You will move into his penthouse. You will attend events with him. You will behave as a devoted wife in public." "And in private?" Nia asked, her throat dry. "In private, you will maintain separate bedrooms. Mr. Cross values his privacy and space. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement about everything you see or hear, and you will not interfere with his business or personal affairs." Nia nodded, relieved but also strangely disappointed. When would this start? Immediately came a voice from the doorway. Julian entered the room as impeccably dressed as the day before. "The Westbrook meeting is in 2 weeks. We'll need to be married by then." 2 weeks? Nia gasped. "But my mother—" "Your mother's treatment will begin today," Julian said flatly. "I've already made arrangements with the hospital." "Sign the papers, Miss Evans." With shaking hands, Nia signed page after page, selling a year of her life to a man who looked at her as if she were just another business transaction. 2 days later, Nia stood in a small courthouse wearing a simple white dress she'd borrowed from a friend. Julian wore a dark suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. There were no guests, no flowers, no music, just a judge who barely looked up as he recited the vows. "I do," Nia whispered, thinking of her mother who believed she was at work. "I do," Julian repeated mechanically. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Julian didn't kiss her. He simply slipped a platinum band onto her finger and nodded curtly. "Let's go, Mrs. Cross," he said, the name sounding foreign and wrong. "We have a lot to do before you're presentable as my wife." As they left the courthouse, Nia caught a glimpse of their reflection in the glass doors, the tall, handsome millionaire, and the ordinary girl from the Bronx. For a moment, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. But then she thought of her mother, who would now get the treatment she desperately needed, and she straightened her shoulders. 1 year. She could survive anything for 1 year. What she didn't know was that surviving Julian Cross would be the easy part. Not falling for him would be the real challenge. Nia stared at the massive penthouse apartment with wide eyes. The living room alone was bigger than her entire apartment in the Bronx. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan, and the furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine. "Your bedroom is down that hallway, last door on the right," Julian said, loosening his tie as he walked toward what she assumed was his home office. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, will show you around. I have work to do." "Wait," Nia called after. "Him. I need to go see my mother to explain all this." Julian turned, his expression impatient. "Fine, the driver will take you. Be back by 7. We have dinner reservations." "Dinner? We need to be seen in public. People need to believe this is real." Nia nodded, clutching her small suitcase. She'd barely had time to pack her few belongings before Julian had whisked her away to his world. An hour later, Nia sat at her mother's bedside in a private hospital room that looked more like a luxury hotel suite. Elaine Evans looked at her, daughter with shock and confusion. "Married," she repeated, her voice weak but filled with disbelief. "To Julian Cross. Baby, what have you done?" "I found a way to pay for your treatment," Nia said, holding her mother's hand. "That's all that matters." "By selling yourself?" Tears filled Elaine's eyes. "I raised you better than this." "It's not like that," Nia insisted, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. "It's a business arrangement. He needed a wife for some business deal, and I needed money for your treatment. In a year it'll be over. And your heart, what happens to that when this is over?" Nia laughed, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, have you seen him? He's cold as ice. There's no danger of me falling for Julian Cross." Her mother didn't look convinced. "Promise me you'll be careful. Men like that. They take what they want and leave destruction behind. I promise." Nia kissed her mother's forehead. "Now, you focus on getting better. That's all I want." When Nia returned to the penthouse, she found a garment bag laid out on her bed with a note attached. "Wear this tonight." Jay inside was an elegant black dress that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. Next to it was a box containing diamond earrings and a matching necklace. Nia touched the dress hesitantly, feeling like an imposter. This wasn't her world. These weren't her things. But for her mother, she would play the part. At exactly 7, she emerged from her room to find Julian waiting in the living room, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark suit. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, the only indication that her appearance had any effect on him. "The dress fits," he said, his tone businesslike. "Good." "Thank you for it," Nia replied stiffly. "And for the jewelry?" "They're not gifts. They're necessities. My wife can't look like a waitress from the Bronx." The words stung, but Nia held her tongue. 1 year, she reminded herself. Just 1 year. The restaurant was the kind of place Nia had only seen in movies. Exclusive, elegant, filled with people who probably spent more on a single meal than she made in a week. As Julian's hand rested on the small of her back, guiding her to their table, she felt eyes on them from every direction. "Smile," Julian murmured in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Everyone's watching." Nia pasted on her best fake smile, leaning into him slightly as if they were actually in love. Julian Cross, a silver-haired man, approached their table with a younger woman on his arm. "So the rumors are true. You've finally been tamed." Julian stood, shaking the man's hand. "Robert, allow me to introduce my wife, Nia Cross." The sound of her new name made Nia's stomach flip. She extended her hand politely. "Lovely to meet you," Robert said, though his eyes held skepticism. "This is quite a surprise. No one even knew Julian was dating anyone." "It was a whirlwind romance," Julian said smoothly, placing his hand over Nia's on the table. "When you know, you know." Robert's companion, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, looked Nia up and down with barely concealed disdain. "And What did you do before you met Julian, Mrs. Cross? Nia opened her mouth to answer truthfully, but Julian cut in. Nia is a photographer, quite talented. It wasn't entirely a lie. She did take photos on the side, but the way Julian said it made it sound like she was a professional with gallery showings. How fascinating, the woman said, clearly not fascinated at all. You must show us your work sometime. Perhaps at our housewarming party next weekend, Julian said. You'll both receive an invitation. After the couple left, Nia leaned forward. A housewarming party? The fastest way to make our marriage seem legitimate is to invite everyone who matters into our home, Julian explained, sipping his wine. Mrs. Chen will handle everything. You just need to smile and play your part. And if they ask more about my photography, Julian shrugged, we'll get you some equipment. Take a few classes. It doesn't matter if you're good, only that you have something to talk about besides waiting tables. The evening continued with more introductions, more lies, more moments of Julian's hand on hers or his arm around her waist, all for show, all meaningless. By the time they returned to the penthouse, Nia was exhausted from the performance. You did adequately, Julian said as they entered the apartment. But we need to work on your story. Tomorrow my PR team will go over the details of our romance with you. Is all this really necessary? Nia asked, kicking off the painful high heels she'd been wearing. Can't we just say we had a private ceremony and leave it at that? Julian's expression hardened. This isn't just about appearances. The Westbrook deal is worth billions. They won't partner with someone whose personal life seems unstable or mysterious. They want family values, tradition, stability. And you think you can fake all that? Something flickered in Julian's eyes, anger perhaps, or something deeper. I'm paying for your mother's treatment. The least you can do is cooperate without questioning my methods. Nia felt properly chastised, remembering why she was there in the first place. You're right. I'm sorry. Julian seemed taken aback by her apology, as if he'd expected a fight. After a moment of awkward silence, he nodded toward her room. You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a busy day. The next morning, Nia was awakened by Mrs. Chen, a kind-faced older woman who served as Julian's housekeeper. Mr. Cross has already left for the office, she informed Nia, but he said to tell you that his stylist will be here at 10, followed by his PR team at noon. Nia groaned internally, but thanked Mrs. Chen for the information. After a quick breakfast, she called the hospital to check on her mother, relieved to hear that the first treatment had gone well. The stylist turned out to be a whirlwind of energy, named Paolo, who took one look at Nia and declared her a diamond in the rough. We must cut your hair, he announced, circling her like a predator, and highlight it. And your nails, disaster. For the next 2 hours, Nia was poked, prodded, and transformed. When Paolo finally spun her chair to face the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her long curls had been tamed into a sleek, shoulder-length style with subtle golden highlights. Her nails were perfectly manicured, and her makeup was flawless, yet natural-looking. Now you look like Mrs. Julian Cross, Paolo declared proudly. Nia wasn't sure how to feel about that. The PR team arrived exactly at noon, 3 serious-looking people with tablets and stern expressions. They sat Nia down in the living room and began the process of creating her new identity. You met 6 months ago at a charity gala, the lead PR woman Vanessa instructed. You were there photographing the event. Julian was captivated by your fresh perspective and asked to see your portfolio. But I don't have a portfolio, Nia pointed out. You do now, Vanessa replied, sliding a tablet across the table. On it were dozens of beautiful photographs, all professionally taken. Learn these, know them. They're yours now. By the end of the session, Nia had a completely fabricated past 6 months. Dates they'd gone on, places they'd traveled together, the romantic proposal on his private yacht. It was exhausting trying to memorize it all. One last thing, Vanessa said before leaving. The press will be interested in you now. No social media posts about your real life. No contact with old friends who might contradict our story. As far as the world is concerned, this version of you is the only one that exists. After they left, Nia sat alone in the massive living room, feeling more isolated than ever. She'd known this arrangement would cost her, but she hadn't realized it would mean erasing who she really was. That evening, Julian returned home with a large box, which he placed on the kitchen counter without explanation. "How did it go with the PR team?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Fine," Nia said flatly. "I now have a completely fictional life." Julian studied her new appearance with clinical detachment. "Paolo did good work. Is that all I am to you? Work that needs to be done?" Julian's expression remained cool. "This is a business arrangement." "Yeah, don't forget that." "How could I?" she shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. "You remind me every chance you get." Instead of getting angry, Julian pushed the box toward her. "For you." Cautiously, Nia opened it to find a professional camera and several lenses. "If you're going to be a photographer, you should at least know how to use a camera properly," Julian explained. "I've arranged for lessons starting tomorrow." Nia touched the equipment reverently. Despite the circumstances, it was the nicest thing anyone had ever given her. "Thank you," she said softly. Julian nodded stiffly, unused to gratitude. The Westbrook. "Meeting is in 10 days. We have the housewarming party this weekend and several public appearances before then. I need you ready." "I will be," Nia promised, still admiring the camera. For a moment, something almost like a smile touched Julian's lips. Then he turned away, heading toward his office. "Dinner in an hour. Mrs. Chen is cooking." The days that followed fell into a strange routine. Julian left early for work, while Nia split her time between photography lessons, visiting her mother, and being coached on how to be the perfect wife by various members of Julian's staff. She learned which fork to use at fancy dinners, how to make small talk with society wives, and the names of all the important people in Julian's business circle. Every evening, they would either go out to be seen at some high-profile restaurant or event, or they would stay in for quiet dinners where they barely spoke. Despite his coldness, Nia began to notice small things about Julian. How his jaw clenched when he was stressed, the way his eyes lit up slightly when talking about a business project he was passionate about, how gentle his touch could be when guiding her through a crowded room, even if it was just for show. The night of the housewarming party arrived, and Nia found herself actually nervous. This would be their biggest test yet. Dozens of Julian's closest business associates and friends, all in their home, watching their every interaction. She wore a stunning emerald green dress that Julian's stylist had selected, her hair and makeup perfectly done. When she emerged from her room, she found Julian waiting, looking uncharacteristically tense. "Remember," he said quietly as the first guests were about to arrive, "tonight is crucial. The Westbrooks will be here. They need to believe that I'm a changed man because of you." "What does that even mean?" Nia asked. Julian's blue eyes locked onto hers. "It means you need to look at me like you love me. Can you do that?" Nia swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how close he was standing. "Yes," she whispered. "I can do that." What she didn't say was that it might not be as difficult as it should be. The housewarming party was in full swing. Elegant men and women in designer clothes filled the penthouse, sipping champagne and admiring the view of the Manhattan skyline. Nia stood by Julian's side, smiling until her cheeks hurt, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. "Julian, your home is magnificent," gushed a woman who'd been introduced as the wife of one of Julian's board members. "And your bride is absolutely lovely. Where have you been hiding her all this time?" Julian's arm slipped around Nia's waist, pulling her closer. "I wanted to keep her all to myself," he said, his voice warm as he gazed down at her, with what appeared to be genuine affection. "Isn't that right, darling?" Nia looked up into his blue eyes, surprised by the tenderness she found there. For a moment, she almost believed it herself. "He's quite possessive," she replied with a smile, playing along. The woman laughed delightedly. "Young love, how refreshing to see in this cynical city." As they moved through the crowd, Julian kept Nia close, his hand never leaving her waist, his eyes constantly seeking hers. It was a performance, she reminded herself, nothing more. "The Westbrooks are here," Julian murmured in her ear. "The older couple by the window. They're our main target tonight." Nia nodded subtly, letting Julian guide her toward an elegant older couple. The man had silver hair and kind eyes, while his wife was petite with an air of quiet sophistication. "Mr. and Mrs. Westbrook," Julian greeted them warmly. "I'm so glad you could make it. This is my wife, Naya." Mr. Westbrook took Naya's hand in, both of his. "So you're the woman who's finally captured Julian Cross's heart. I must say we were beginning to think it couldn't be done." "It just took the right person," Julian said, looking at Naya with such convincing love that she felt her heart skip a beat. Mrs. Westbrook studied Naya with curious eyes. "Tell me, dear, how did you two meet? Julian has always been so focused on work." Nya recited the story the PR team had created, adding little details of her own to make it feel more authentic. "I was photographing a charity gala, and honestly I was so focused on my shots that I didn't even notice him watching me. Until he stepped right into my frame." Julian chuckled, picking up the story. "She told me to move, quite forcefully. No one speaks to me that way." "I had no idea who he was," Naya added, which was true enough. "I just knew he was ruining my shot." "I was intrigued," Julian continued, his eyes never leaving Naya's face. "So I asked to see her portfolio. Her perspective was different. Fresh, she sees beauty in places most people overlook." Something in his voice made Naya wonder if he was still acting. The way he described her fictional photography seemed almost genuine. Mrs. Westbrook smiled warmly. "Well, it certainly sounds like fate. And marriage after only 6 months? That's rather quick, especially for someone as cautious as you, Julian." "When you know, Julian said simply, bringing Naya's hand to his lips for a gentle kiss that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Mr. Westbrook nodded approvingly. "That's what I like to hear. Family should always come before business. Speaking of which, I think our companies have much to discuss. Why don't we set up a proper meeting next week?" Julian's expression remained pleasant, but Nia felt his body tense with excitement. "I'd like that very much." As the party continued, Nia excused herself to get some air on the balcony. The city lights sparkled below her, beautiful but distant, much like the world she was now pretending to belong to. "You did well," Julian's voice came from behind her. The Westbrooks were impressed. Nia turned to face him. "So your plan is working? Better than expected." He handed her a glass of champagne. "Mr. Westbrook wants to meet on Tuesday to discuss the merger." "I'm glad," Nia said, meaning it. The sooner Julian got what he wanted, the sooner her mother would be safe. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the city. When Nia shivered slightly in the cool night air, Julian surprised her by removing his jacket and placing it around her shoulders. The gesture was unexpectedly gentle, and the jacket was warm from his body. "Thank you," she said softly. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. "You're quite good at this, acting." "So are you," Nia replied. "I almost believed you were in love with me in there." Something flashed in Julian's eyes, an emotion Nia couldn't quite read. Before he could respond, they were interrupted by one of the guests calling for Julian. "We should go back in," he said, his voice returning to its usual business-like tone. "Keep up the good work." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. By the time the last guest left, it was well past midnight, and Nia was exhausted from the performance. "Get some rest," Julian told her as she handed his jacket back. "You earned it." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd given her since they'd met. The following week was busy with more public appearances. Julian took Nia to a charity auction, a gallery opening, and an exclusive dinner at the mayor's residence. Each time, they played the part of the loving newlyweds to perfection. In public, Julian was attentive, affectionate, even tender. But as soon as they were alone, he returned to his distant, businesslike self. Tuesday arrived, and with it Julian's important meeting with Mr. Westbrook. Nia spent the day visiting her mother, whose condition was already showing signs of improvement. With the new treatment, "You look different," Elaine observed, studying her daughter's face. "It's not just the hair or the fancy clothes. There's something in your eyes." "I'm just tired, Mom," Nia replied, avoiding her mother's knowing gaze. "Playing the perfect wife is exhausting." "Are you sure that's all it is? You mention this Julian in every conversation." Nia felt her cheeks warm. "Only because he's a constant presence in my life right now." Elaine reached for her daughter's hand. Be careful, baby. Remember, this is temporary. Don't let your heart forget that. I know exactly what this is, Naya insisted, though lately she wasn't so sure. The Julian she saw in public, the one who looked at her with warmth, who touched her with tenderness, who listened when she spoke, was becoming increasingly difficult to separate from the cold businessman who had bought a year of her life. When she returned to the penthouse that evening, she found Julian in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and a rare smile on his face. "It went well?" Naya asked, setting down her purse. "Better than well," Julian replied, his eyes bright with triumph. "Westbrook agreed to the merger. We sign the papers next month." "That's wonderful," Naya said, genuinely happy for him. "Congratulations." Julian hesitated, then held up his glass in a toast to successful partnerships. The double meaning wasn't lost on Naya. She had fulfilled her part of their bargain, helping him secure the Westbrook deal. What would happen now? Would he still need her to maintain the illusion, or would she become unnecessary? As if reading her thoughts, Julian added, "We'll need to keep up appearances until everything is finalized, of course. The Westbrooks have invited us to their lake house this weekend, 3 days in the country." Nia nodded, trying to ignore the relief she felt at still being needed. "Of course, whatever you need." "What I need," Julian said, finishing his drink, "is for my wife to join me for dinner. I've asked Mrs. Chen to prepare something special to celebrate." Dinner that night was different. Julian seemed more relaxed than Nia had ever seen him, even asking about her mother's condition, and seeming genuinely pleased when she reported the treatment was working. "I have something for you," he said as they finished their meal. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Naya's heart raced as he opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring, far more elaborate than the simple band they'd used for the ceremony. "Your wedding ring should match your new life," Julian explained, taking her hand. "The one you have is inadequate." He slipped the new ring onto her finger, his touch lingering longer than necessary. The diamonds caught the light, sparkling, almost as brightly as the unexpected warmth in Julian's eyes. "It's beautiful," Nia whispered, unable to look away from his face. "But you didn't have to." "I wanted to," Julian interrupted, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. For a moment, the mask of the cold businessman slipped, revealing something vulnerable underneath. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. "It's more convincing this way." The weekend at the Westbrooks Lake House brought new challenges. Sharing a room with Julian was necessary to maintain their cover, something that hadn't happened during their public appearances in the city. The guest room was beautiful, with a king-sized bed and a view of the lake, but Nia couldn't help feeling nervous as she unpacked her things beside Julian's. "I'll sleep on the couch," he said matter-of-factly, noting her discomfort. "You don't have to," Nia began. "It's fine," Julian cut her off. "Our arrangement doesn't include sharing a bed." That night, after a pleasant dinner with the Westbrooks and their other guests, Nia lay awake in the large bed, aware of Julian's presence on the couch across the room. The moonlight streaming through the windows illuminated his form, and she could tell from his breathing that he wasn't asleep either. "Julian," she whispered. "Yes?" "Thank you for my mother's treatment. I don't think I've properly thanked you." There was a long pause before he replied, "You're fulfilling your end of the bargain, that's thanks enough." "Still," Nia persisted, "you've changed our lives. Whatever your reasons, I'm grateful." Another pause, longer this time. "You should get some sleep. We have hiking with the Westbrooks tomorrow." The next day was surprisingly pleasant. The autumn weather was perfect for hiking, and the colorful foliage around the lake was breathtaking. Nia brought her camera, her real one, not just for show, and found herself genuinely enjoying capturing the natural beauty. "You have a good eye," Mr. Westbrook commented, watching as she photographed a red maple leaf floating on the surface of the lake. "Thank you," Nia replied. "I've always loved photography, but I never had the chance to pursue it seriously until recently." It wasn't entirely a lie. She had loved photography since high school, but could never afford proper equipment or training. "Julian mentioned you're quite talented," Mrs. Westbrook said, joining them. "He seems very proud of your work." Nia glanced over to where Julian was engaged in conversation with some of the other guests. "Does he?" Mrs. Westbrook smiled knowingly. "Oh yes, when you were getting drinks earlier, he couldn't stop talking about your unique perspective. I've known Julian for years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Nia's heart fluttered traitorously. "We haven't been married long," she said carefully. "Time doesn't matter when it's right," Mrs. Westbrook replied. "My Harold and I were engaged after 3 weeks. 45 years later, here we are." That evening, there was a bonfire by the lake. As they sat around the fire with the other guests, Julian's arm draped casually around Nia's shoulders. She found herself leaning into him, not just for show, but for the comfort of his warmth. "You're getting quite good with that camera," he murmured in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "I enjoy it," she admitted. "More than I expected to. You should pursue it. Professionally, I mean. When—" He stopped abruptly. "When this is over," Nia finished silently in her head. "When our year is up and we go our separate ways," the thought brought an unexpected pang of sadness. In the firelight, with Julian's arm around her and the gentle sound of the lake lapping at the shore, their arrangement felt less like a business deal and more like something real, something that against all odds Nia was beginning to want. Their last night at the lake house, Nia woke in the darkness to find Julian standing by the window, looking out at the moonlit water. Unable to go back to sleep, she slipped out of bed and joined him. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. He shook his head, not looking at her. "I was thinking about the merger. There are still details to work out." "Is that all?" Nia asked, somehow knowing there was more. Julian turned to her then, his eyes serious in the dim light. "This weekend has been different. The Westbrooks. They're friends. They all see us as a real couple, and you've been playing my part." Nia finished for him when he hesitated. "Is that all it is?" Julian asked, his voice barely audible. "The part you're playing?" The question hung between them, charged with possibility. Nia's heart raced as she tried to find the right answer, the honest answer. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "Sometimes it feels real." Julian's hand came up to touch her cheek, so gently it made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pulled back, the wall coming down over his emotions once more. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice returning to its usual detached tone. "We head back to the city tomorrow." As they drove back to Manhattan the next day, Nia couldn't stop thinking about that moment by the window. Had she imagined the longing in Julian's eyes? Was she fooling herself into seeing something that wasn't there? When they arrived at the penthouse, Julian immediately retreated to his office, citing work that needed his attention. Nia stood alone, in the living room, feeling more confused than ever. In just a few weeks, her carefully constructed walls were beginning to crumble. Despite all her mother's warnings, despite knowing this was temporary, she was falling for Julian Cross. Later that evening, as Nia was sorting through the photos she'd taken at the lake, Julian emerged from his office. "Nia," he began, his voice strangely hesitant. "There's something I need to tell you." Before he could continue, his phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. "I need to take this. It's important." Nia nodded, watching as he stepped onto the balcony to take the call. Through the glass doors, she could see his expression change from annoyed to concerned. When he returned, his face was grim. "What's wrong?" she asked. "That was my assistant. Someone has been asking questions about our marriage. A reporter from the Daily Chronicle is digging into your background, your mother's condition, the timing of everything." Nia felt a chill run down her spine. "What does that mean?" "It means someone suspects our arrangement isn't real. If this gets out..." "The Westbrook deal could fall through," Nia finished, understanding immediately the implications. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of stress. "Not just that. Your mother's treatment, your reputation, my company, everything would be affected." "What do we do?" Nia asked, fear gripping her. Julian's expression hardened with determination. "We fight back. We make our marriage so convincingly real that no one would dare question it." "How?" "We go on the offensive. An exclusive interview with a rival publication. Photos, details of our love story, the works. We need to control the narrative." Nia nodded, pushing aside her confused feelings. to focus on the task at hand. "Okay, I'm ready. Whatever it takes." Julian looked at her with something like admiration. "You continue to surprise me, Nia Cross." The way he said her married name sent a shiver through her, a reminder that no matter how real it might feel, their relationship had an expiration date. But as Julian began to outline their plan to save both their reputations, Nia made a silent admission to herself. She was in love with her husband, a husband who had bought her, who saw their marriage as a business transaction, who would let her walk away when the year was up, unless somehow she could make him fall in love with her too. The exclusive interview was scheduled with Style magazine, one of the most prestigious publications in New York. Julian's PR team had prepared them extensively, coaching them on every detail of their fabricated love story. "Remember, be specific, but not too specific," Vanessa advised as they sat in the penthouse living room the morning of the interview. "Details make it believable, but too many details sound rehearsed." Nia nodded, her stomach in knots. She'd never been comfortable with lying, and now she would be doing it on a grand scale. The irony wasn't lost on her. She would be telling the world she was in love with Julian, and it would be the most honest thing she'd said in months. "You'll be fine," Julian said, surprising her by taking her hand. "Just be yourself." "Myself?" Nia raised an eyebrow. "I thought the whole point was to be someone else." Julian's expression softened slightly. "The way you look at me sometimes, that's all you need to do, it's convincing." Nia felt her cheeks warm. Had he noticed her feelings? Was she that transparent? The interviewer, a sophisticated woman named Catherine Lewis, arrived with a photographer. They set up in the living room, where the large windows provided the perfect backdrop of the Manhattan skyline. "So, Julian Cross is finally married," Catherine began, her voice warm but her eyes shrewd. "The business world is still in shock. Tell me, how did the most notorious bachelor in New York come to settle down so suddenly?" Julian's arm draped around Nia's shoulders as they sat together on the sofa. "When you meet the right person, everything changes," he said, his voice convincingly sincere. "My priorities shifted the moment I met Nia." Catherine turned to Nia. "And you, Mrs. Cross, were you aware of Julian's reputation when you met him?" "Actually, no," Nia replied truthfully. "I wasn't part of his world. I was just focused on my photography. That's what drew me to her," Julian added, his thumb absently stroking Nia's shoulder. "She wasn't impressed by my money or my name. She saw me as just a man who was ruining her shot." Catherine laughed. "So it wasn't love at first sight?" "For me it was," Julian said, looking at Nia with such tenderness that for a moment she forgot it was all for show. She was different from anyone I'd ever met, genuine, strong, uncompromising. The interview continued, with Catherine asking about their whirlwind romance, their small wedding, and their future plans. Each answer was carefully crafted to align with their story, yet as Julian spoke about Nia, about her talent, her compassion, her spirit, his words carried a ring of truth that surprised her. The photographer positioned them for photos throughout. The penthouse, Julian and Nia in the kitchen, laughing together. On the balcony, gazing at the view. In the living room, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "Perfect," the photographer said, as Julian looked down at Nia, their faces close. "The camera loves you two. The chemistry is incredible." After the interview team left, Nia and Julian stood in silence for a moment. "Do you think they believed us?" Nia finally asked. Julian nodded. Catherine is tough, but she seemed convinced. "The article will be out next week, which should counter any rumors the Daily Chronicle might publish." "Good," Nia said, though part of her felt hollow. The more convincingly they played this game, the harder it would be when it ended. Julian checked his watch. "I have meetings this afternoon. Will you be okay?" "I'm going to visit Mom," Nia replied. "The doctors say she's responding well to the treatment." A genuine smile crossed Julian's face. "I'm glad to hear that." As he turned to leave, Nia called, "After him, Julian." He paused, looking back at her. "Thank you for what you said in the interview about me being strong and genuine. It was nice." Something flickered in Julian's eyes, something warm and real. "I meant it," he said quietly. And then he was gone, leaving Naya to wonder if perhaps this arrangement was changing him as much as it was changing her. At the hospital, Elaine was sitting up in bed, looking better than she had in months. Leaky. Color had returned to her cheeks, and she was even eating properly again. "There's my girl," she said as Naya entered the room with a bouquet of fresh flowers. "And looking more like a society wife every day." Nya kissed her mother's cheek. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The doctors are very pleased with how I'm responding to the treatment." Elaine studied her daughter's face. "But something's bothering you. What is it?" Naya sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's hand. "We did an interview today for a magazine about our love story. And that's troubling you because it's all a lie, but..." Naya hesitated, tears filling her eyes. "Mom, I think I'm falling in love with him. For real." Elaine squeezed her hand. "Oh, baby, I was afraid this would happen. He's different when we're in public. Warm, attentive, even tender. But as soon as we're alone, the walls come back up. It's like there are two Julians and I don't know which one is real." "Maybe they both are," Elaine suggested. "People aren't simple, Naya, especially people who've been hurt." "How do you know he's been hurt?" "Men don't become cold and isolated unless something made them that way." Elaine touched her daughter's cheek. "Your heart has always been your strength, Naya. Trust it." The Style magazine article came out the following week, featuring a beautiful cover photo of Julian and Naya on their balcony, the city spread out behind them like a glittering carpet. The headline read, "Julian Cross, the man who found love." The story painted them as the perfect couple, the powerful businessman and the artistic photographer whose different worlds collided in a passionate love affair. The photos showed a comfort and intimacy between them that looked absolutely genuine. "They did a good job," Julian commented as they looked at the magazine together in the living room. "This should put any rumors to rest." Nya nodded, feeling a strange mix of pride and sadness. "We make a convincing couple." Julian was quiet for a moment, staring at the cover photo. 6 months, he said suddenly. "What? We've been married for 6 months now." Julian's voice was neutral, but his eyes held a question. "Halfway through our contract." The reminder stung more than Nia expected. "Has it been that long already?" Julian nodded, setting down the magazine. "The Westbrook merger is almost finalized. Just a few more weeks." "And then?" Nia asked, dreading the answer. "And then we'll have accomplished what we set out to do." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Once the merger was complete, would Julian still need their arrangement, or would she have served her purpose? Before she could ask, Julian's phone rang. He answered it, his expression quickly turning serious. "I understand, I'll be right there." He hung up and turned to Naya. "That was the hospital. Your mother's had a setback. They want us there right away." Fear gripped Naya's heart as they rushed to the hospital. In the car, Julian held her hand tightly, his presence steady and reassuring. Dr. Roberts, her mother's oncologist, met them in the hallway outside Elaine's room. "Mrs. Cross was responding well to the treatment, but we've detected a new growth. It's aggressive and we need to adjust our approach immediately." "Will she be okay?" Naya asked, her voice trembling. The doctor's expression was grave but not hopeless. "We have options, but we need to act quickly. There's an experimental treatment showing promising results for cases like hers, but it's not covered by insurance. Cost is not an issue," Julian said firmly. "Whatever she needs, make it happen." Dr. Roberts nodded. "I'll get everything set up. You can see her now, but she's resting." Elaine looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, her breathing shallow. Nya sat beside her, taking her hand gently while Julian stood by the door, giving them space. "Hey, Mom," Nia whispered. "The doctors are going to try something new, okay? You just need to keep fighting." Elaine's eyes fluttered open. "Nia," she murmured. "And Julian, you came." Julian stepped forward, surprising Naya by taking Elaine's other hand. "Of course we came. Your family." The simple words brought tears to Naya's eyes. In that moment, Julian wasn't the cold businessman who had bought a year of her life. He was simply a man supporting his family in a crisis. They stayed at the hospital for hours, until Elaine fell into a deep sleep and the nurses assured them they could return in the morning. In the car on the way home, Julian was unusually quiet. "Thank you," Nia said softly, "for being there, for paying for the new treatment." Julian glanced at her, his eyes unreadable in the dim light. "You don't need to thank me. It's part of our arrangement." The words should have hurt, but something in his tone told Nia there was more he wasn't saying. The next few weeks were tense as Elaine began the experimental treatment. Nia spent most of her days at the hospital, and to her surprise, Julian often joined her there after work. He brought food, made sure Nia took breaks, and even sat with Elaine when Nia needed to rest. One evening, as they sat in the hospital cafeteria, Julian watching as Nia picked at her sandwich, he said, "You need to take care of yourself too, you know? Your mother needs you strong." Nia sighed. "I'm trying, it's just, I can't lose her, Julian." Without hesitation, Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "You won't. Elaine is a fighter, like her daughter." Nia looked up, meeting his gaze. "Why are you being so kind? This goes beyond our contract." Julian seemed to struggle with his words, something Nia had never seen before. Finally he said, "Because I care, Nia, about you, about your mother." "Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes," Nia admitted. "The Julian I met 6 months ago wouldn't have said that." "The Julian you met 6 months ago didn't know you." He squeezed her hand gently. "People change." The moment was interrupted by Julian's phone. He checked it and frowned. "It's Alexander from the board. The Westbrook deal is hitting some last-minute complications. I need to go handle this." Nia nodded in understanding. "Go. I'll stay with Mum." Julian hesitated, then leaned across the table, and for the first time when no one was watching, kissed her cheek. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Nia watched him go, her heart racing from that simple gesture. It had been real, not for show. Maybe, just maybe, his feelings were changing too. 3 days later, the news was encouraging. Elaine was responding well to the new treatment, showing signs of improvement that had the doctors cautiously optimistic. Nia returned to the penthouse to find Julian in his office, surrounded by papers and looking stressed. "Is everything okay?" she asked from the doorway. Julian looked up, his expression clearing slightly at the sight of her. "Just some issues with the merger. How's your mother?" "Better," Nia said, smiling genuinely for the first time in days. "The treatment is working." Relief crossed Julian's face. "That's wonderful news. I thought we could celebrate. I asked Mrs. Chen to prepare dinner for us tonight." Julian hesitated. "I'd like that, but I need to finish this first. The signing is tomorrow and there are still details to work out." "Tomorrow?" Nia's smile faltered. "So soon?" Julian nodded, seeming not to notice her reaction. "If all goes well, by this time tomorrow, Cross Enterprises will have merged with Westbrook Industries, and their arrangement would no longer be necessary," Nia thought, her heart sinking. "I'll let you work then," she said quietly, turning to leave. "Nia," Julian called after her, "save me some dinner. I won't be long." Dinner was ready, but Julian didn't emerge from his office. After waiting for over an hour, Nia went to check on him, only to find him asleep at his desk, papers scattered around him. She stood watching him for a moment, seeing the vulnerability in his sleeping face that he never allowed when awake. Gently, she draped his suit jacket over his shoulders. As she turned to leave, something on his desk caught her eye. A folder, labeled Evans Nia. Curiosity overcame her, and she carefully opened it. Inside were documents relating to her mother's treatment, but also something unexpected, a deed to a small photography studio in Brooklyn, dated 2 weeks earlier with Nia's name on it. There were also brochures for photography courses at the New York Institute of Art, and applications filled out in Julian's handwriting. Nia stared at the papers in confusion. Why would Julian be planning all this? And why hadn't he told her? She jumped when Julian's voice came from behind her. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." Nia turned to find him watching her, his expression unreadable. "What is all this?" Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of nervousness. "I wanted it to be a surprise for after the merger. Her studio in my name. Art school applications? I don't understand. Julian took a deep breath. I thought that when our contract ends, you might want to pursue photography professionally. The studio would give you a place to start. Nia felt dizzy with confusion. But why? We agreed I'd walk away after a year. You'd have no obligation to me anymore. Julian stepped closer, his eyes showing an emotion Nia had never seen in them before, vulnerability. What if I don't want you to walk away? The words hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Nia's heart raced. What are you saying, Julian? I'm saying that this stopped being just a business arrangement for me a long time ago. Julian took her hands in his. I'm saying that the thought of you leaving in 6 months makes me feel like I can't breathe. Nia could hardly believe what she was hearing. But you're Julian Cross. You don't believe in love, only in deals and contracts. I didn't, Julian admitted. Until I saw how you fought for your mother, how you stood up to me, how you never compromised who you are despite everything. You changed me, Nia. Tears filled Nia's eyes. I thought I was just a transaction. To you. Julian shook his head, bringing a hand up to cup her cheek. You were at first, but somehow without meaning to, you became everything. So what are you proposing now, Mr. Cross? Nia asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Another contract? Julian smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. No, I'm proposing something much more dangerous, something with no expiration date. I'm proposing love, Nia. Real love. Nia could hardly believe this was happening. What about the merger, your business? You don't need me for that anymore. I don't need you for business, Julian agreed. I need you for me, because I love you, Nia Cross, and I'm hoping, against all odds, that somewhere along the way, you might have started to love me too. Nia let the tears fall freely now. I do, she whispered. I've been fighting it, telling myself it wasn't real, that you would never feel the same. But I do love you, Julian. For the first time, Julian pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Not for show, not for an audience, but for themselves. A real kiss, filled with all the emotions they'd been holding back for months. When they finally pulled apart, Julian rested, his forehead against hers. Stay with me, he whispered. Not for a year, for good. What about our contract? Nia asked. Julian smiled. I think we need a new one. One that says, till death do us part. The next morning, Julian and Nia arrived at the hospital together to share the good news with Elaine. They found her sitting up in bed, looking stronger than she had in weeks. Well, look at you two, Elaine said, her eyes twinkling. Something's different. Nia sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's hand. Mom, Julian and I have something to tell you. Our marriage, it's real now. We love each other. Elaine smiled knowingly. I suspected as much. The way you two look at each other, that can't be faked. Julian sat on Elaine's other side. I want you to know that I'll always take care of Nia and you. You're my family now. Elaine patted his hand. I know you will. Son, I've seen how you've changed these past months. Love has a way of doing that to people. Later that day, Julian signed the merger documents with the Westbrooks. Mr. Westbrook shook his hand warmly. Congratulations, Julian. Not just on the merger, but on finding such a wonderful wife. She's made you a better man. Julian looked across the room to where Nia stood chatting with Mrs. Westbrook. She has, he agreed. The best decision I ever made wasn't business at all. It was marrying her. That evening, they stood together on the balcony of the penthouse. Julian's arms wrapped around Nia from behind as they watched the sunset over the city. Do you regret it? Nia asked quietly. Our unusual beginning. Julian kissed the top of her head. How could I? It brought me to you. Although I admit it wasn't my most conventional business transaction. Nia turned in his arms to face him. Julian Cross, are you making a joke? Julian smiled, the coldness that had once defined him completely gone. I'm learning from my very patient wife. You know, Nia said thoughtfully, when I walked into your office that day offering myself in exchange for my mother's treatment, I never imagined this would be the outcome. What did you imagine? I thought I was selling a year of my life, Nia admitted. Instead, I found the rest of it. Julian pulled her closer. "I thought I was buying a wife for show. Instead, I got something money could never buy." "And what's that?" Nia asked, her eyes shining. "Love," Julian said simply. "Real love." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Julian and Nia sealed their new beginning with a kiss, no longer bound by a contract, but by something far more powerful and enduring. 6 months later, Elaine Evans sat in the front row of a small chapel, tears in her eyes as she watched her daughter walk down the aisle toward Julian. This time there was no courthouse, no cold ceremony. This time they exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising not just a year but a lifetime. "I never believed in fairy tales," Julian said, holding Nia's hands in his. "I thought life was about power and control, about winning at all costs. Then you walked into my office and challenged everything I thought I knew. You taught me that the greatest victory isn't making a billion-dollar deal. It's finding someone who sees past all the walls and loves you anyway." Nia smiled through her tears. "I came to you out of desperation, offering a business deal. I never expected to find my heart's home. You've given me more than security, more than a future. You've given me love that asks for nothing in return, and that is the greatest gift of all." As they were pronounced husband and wife, this time for real, Nia looked out at their small gathering of friends. In the front row beside her mother sat the Westbrooks, beaming proudly. They had been the first to know the truth about the beginning of Julian and Nia's relationship, and far from being angry, they had been touched by the love story that had grown from such unusual beginnings. At the reception, held in the garden of Julian and Nia's new home, a beautiful house with room for Elaine and a professional studio for Nia's growing photography business, Mr. Westbrook raised a toast to the couple. "To Julian and Nia," he said, his voice warm with affection, "who prove that the best investments are the ones we make with our hearts." Later, as they danced under the stars, Julian held Nia close. "Happy?" he asked. Nia looked up at the man, who had once been the cold, distant businessman who bought a year of her life, now transformed by love into a warm, caring husband who had given her a lifetime instead. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "Who would have thought that being bought would lead to being so completely loved?" Julian kissed her gently. "It wasn't about buying or selling in the end. It was about finding. I found you and you found me, and that's a deal that will never expire." The end.